Hi, my name is Ken Lasson. I wrote the microbiome prescription website. By career, I am a software developer engineer, a statistician, an artificial intelligence engineer. I'm not a medical professional. However, I do know how to move data around and to do data analysis, which is not necessarily a strong skill for most medical professionals. Okay, this is a companion video for long COVID and update. It's a recurring theme, etc. I originally started the site and blogs as a result of dealing with chronic fatigue syndrome, which is a very, very close sibling to long COVID. So the site and tools largely existed before COVID showed up in the world. And now it looks like it's a good opportunity for the same set of tools to be reused for long COVID. Okay, let's start with some basic information. I'm going to leave most of the technical stuff for people reading the blog post. But to paraphrase one study on long COVID, multiple kingdom gut microbiome analysis defined condition severity and in some cases the syndrome. That has been my theme for at least the last 7 years. Basically, if you get rid of all of the microbiome shift involved in a condition, the speed, the severity decreases, or the condition disappears totally. Or at least it's, in some cases, like for Parkinson's, it will in theory slow the progression into it. So, simple concept. For a number of studies confirms that it actually is correct. Hence, hey, correcting the microbiome is a extremely powerful tool, and in some ways a very easy, low-risk tool to use. Instead of doing a new experimental drug with unknown side effects, you change your diet. That is far safer, lower risk. And in cases where, for example, in Canada, where you cannot get a MD and every wait list is 9 months long, it allows somebody with care and caution to become their own physician. So, without doing adverse risks, you're not asking for prescription drugs, you are simply changing your diet style, which most people do anyways from whatever they read on the internet, except here we're doing it with some science behind it. Okay, so first thing is I dropped in a whole bunch of citations, all of which indicated one or another type of microbiome shift has happened with long COVID. And then generally, there's a links to publish there, so you can go off and do your own reading, come up with your own opinion, which is fine. I am not an expert. And the last one is where I paraphrase, which is basically saying that, hey, some researcher found this to be the exact case for long COVID. Okay, now, often I will, when looking at a particular condition, look for enzyme data as a starting point. And the reason is this. We have all the individual bacteria, but the thing is, there's a hodgepodge that produces the same enzymes or consumes the same enzymes. So it's a hodgepodge. Now, if we cluster the bacteria together who produce this particular enzyme, we may find that we won't find statistical significance for the individual bacteria, but all of them are sitting at 80 percentile, 80 percentile, 80 percentile, 80 percentile. And the net result of that is some enzymes go sky high through the roof, or other cases goes crashing down. We are clustering bacteria by enzymes effectively, which is a novel way of approaching the problem. And in this case, it was a blow me away. I can't quite believe what I got. Okay, so what we have here is we have the enzymes. We notice the first set, we have the probability of being p less than 0.001. Well, stronger than most clinical studies we do. The degree of freedom, the t-score, you sort of look at that t-score, that degree of freedom, that value, and you go, okay, that's significant. However, it keeps going. It keeps going. It keeps going. It keeps going. Don't you want to run away from this table now? And we get a whopping 190 7 items there. And at P0001, the chances of false positives, well, you may get 8 false positives in 197 items. In other words, most of the stuff there is going to be significant with confidence. And then we go down to the next list, which is not quite as strong, just less than P001. We're not as extreme. And we have just 87. In this case, we only have false positive rate, given that we have 8,000 enzymes we're looking at, is about 80, which means that possibly this entire list can be ignored because A, it's lower probability of being significant, and there's a good chance that everything that shows up on this shorter list are false positives, which is sort of an interesting scenario. Okay, so we have probably 190 enzymes which are significant. I will leave it to a microbiologist or a professional to sort out what those 190 different enzyme interactions are and combinations are. It is a non-trivial problem. So with that, let's go over and see if we can see similar patterns in bacteria. And the answer is yes. We have a good stack of things, not that big a list. And more importantly, up above, we have some t-scores sitting there at 13. Here we get, for things with about the same degree of freedom, 660, we only talking about 4. So we have much weaker statistical significance. The enzymes are far better than the actual bacteria. The bacteria is something we can deal with. The enzymes are a little bit complicated. And one that got us is the enzymes we'll see, or we saw, always had the person with long COVID having higher enzyme levels than the control population, which means that one of the solutions which applies for some condition, which is taking probiotics that supply the missing enzymes, you don't want to go there. You don't want to start adding probiotics to add more enzymes in. The problem is you have too many enzymes to begin with. So that is a red herring to suggest probiotics should be involved. The problem is having too many of some enzymes. So probiotics are unlikely to be a major factor, simply because one of their key roles is producing enzymes. Okay, so now we have the primary list, which again, we are talking not 8,000, but probably about 800 bacteria or less. So we have the list here, which means that perhaps one of these is going to be a false thing. We notice one thing, that often it's the same grouping. We got a family and we have an order. We have the same number, same thing. So for a whole bunch of things, we can actually collapse it down, and often we'll usually work from the highest level, which means we'll go for the order, we go for the genus when we have duplication of values. So just a quick simplification there. That drops the list down even shorter, but that's fine. And then we have the less significant ones sitting there. And some of them are reasonably good, and there. So we go through and we get a short list of things which are probably the key bacteria in terms of significance and in terms of volume. However, there's concerns whether or not it's high volume ones which are the cause. And at that point in time, I should point out that most clinical study uses stuff which is high degree, high number of commonality across the control and the people with the condition. So they filter out data horrendously. And then we end up often having those clinical studies focus exclusively on high population items. So their results are my results. I have a different philosophy for looking at the data. So I look at all the data and say, okay, teach me something data. And we do see things coming up. So one of the first things I did was compare to published studies, and we found that there's only one in terms of bacteria identified to be significant, we only have agreement on one single thing. And that one single thing, we have the opposite conclusion. They say it's too high, we say they say it's too low, we say it's too high. And there we end up with problem. There are, my experience looking at most of the studies is often they go in with this massive set of assumptions or pre-filtering conditions, and the result is they don't look at all the available data or don't know how to work with all the available data. We have the one study which was cited, they have a smaller size. They have 106 with long COVID and 68 control, so they have a much smaller sample size. We have 668 in terms of degrees of freedom, which means that combination of people is what we end up having. I think we have 150 people with long COVID and then a much bigger control group. And we're also dealing with different periods in onset. Also, it's far more random how long ago they have it. Usually it would be at least 6 months. Often it would be a year or even 2 years. And their study was based on 6 months. The microbiome evolved, so to have differences when the period since the COVID happened is to be expected. So in general, my general conclusion is we're not contradicting each other. We are basically saying we have a slightly different drumbeat between the two studies. And one of my favorite analogy is to look at the old classic story, which I rename as the three microbiologists attempting to describe the microbiome of elephants. And if you read the story and suppose that each touch point of the three blind people is where to take the microbiome sample from, you get the point very clearly. So it is the reality. Okay, now, one of the things is that there are studies and the research above reports at different taxa levels, which means you end up with comparison issues. However, just like with enzymes are an effective way of categorizing things, the AI-generated suggestions are similar a good way of categorizing things and clustering things, actually is the term I was looking for. So I said, okay, let's run through the AI algorithm for suggestions, each set, and let's see what they agree with, which would help and which would not help. If there was no agreement at any level, we end up with 50% agreement because it's basically random coins. Yes, 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 yes. We don't. We end up getting 76% agreement, which means that they are sort of converging, which as a fuzzy logic statistician, hey, that's a very good sign. And when I drill down furthermore into the data, for drugs and non-drugs, we end up with 90% agreement. And for prescription items, 94% agreement. Now, when it comes to herbs and other things, prebiotics, we don't have very much agreement. And the basic reason of that is that the data sources for drugs and prescription one is what I call dense data. It doesn't just list impact one. There's a beautiful study which I've made use of, which lists literally hundreds of bacteria impacted by one drug. If you take a look at any prebiotic or probiotics, you won't get that type of data anywhere. You'll get 3 or 4 bacteria impacted. And even if you go through all the literature in PubMed, you maybe get up to a dozen for many of the items in terms of things which are direct citation. So getting lousy rates of agreement for things where we have very little data and very good for things where we have a lot of data is to be expected. Okay, so we now are at the interesting point. You may well be a long chronic fatigue patient or person treating long COVID. Haven't had enough cups of coffee this morning. I will. Long COVID patient or long COVID treating physician or naturopath or whatever. The question is how to use the data. And that's what I'm going to do next. It's very simple. The engine on microbiome prescription, the AI engine, is designed to use consensus because I know we don't know the right way of doing things. So what we can do is toss all the logical ways and then see where everybody agrees. Where everybody agrees, that's a safe course forward. Even though we have different assumptions here, different assumptions there, if everybody agrees on certain things, then those things are very high probability to be the right thing. So it is consensus building. It is there's a variety of other terms for it, but I like to use the word consensus. We will do analysis on a sample and see if there is agreement as to what the person should take. And we expect somewhere about 75% agreement or higher. Again, depends on what you're taking a look at. And that is a direct function of data density. How much data do we have or don't have? The less data we have, the poorer the results are going to be. Okay, so let's go over and do it. Here I have a sample for somebody who has marked as long COVID as being a condition. So what I'm going to do is on the site, this person is a biome site, which is key because all of the reference, the reference sample, sample with the condition and the control all went through biome site, and they had sufficient data volume for both groups to get statistical significant. Other labs like Foreign and Ombre don't have enough data left. In time they may, but at the moment they don't. So basically, biome site is the way to go. Get your orders done. They ship worldwide, so no matter where you are in the world, you can get it. Okay, and the thing we go over into research features, and we go down to experimental there, and we end up there, and we see mark all the symptoms this person has, so his age, other things. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at one thing only, the COVID long one. We can add in other things, but for purposes of this illustration, we're just going to go here, and voila, we see the bacteria which are a strong, what I'll call a hard match, and that is because their sample count is above the sample count of people with the condition, and is much further away from people without the symptom. So that's there. I'm also going to take a look at some other ones, see if any of them falls between. And that, in this case, we have with symptoms is that, without symptoms is that. And in this case, I'm marking it. And this one wasn't included because the percentile, there was no percentile data available for this particular thing. And that it's updated periodically depending on how many samples we have for a bacteria. And down here we have another one which is the same scenario, which is there. It probably, if I refresh the data, those numbers will show up. And now we have here low, nope. This one, nope. This one is okay. People with condition have this number. People normal are here, and he's low, so he is on the wrong. He actually agrees with the PubMed studies are having slightly more. Actually, no, he agrees with our results, but he's right in the middle. So there, and then this one is the same thing. So here we have everything which are likely candidates. We now click that add to there, and voila, we see the suggestions there. And now we just click get suggestions, which gives us the ability to add in all sorts of things. I'm going to go and mark everything, and that is very intentional. And then because I had the best results with prescription drugs and other things, I want to make sure we include this in this example. So we get suggestions to new windows. And there we have the suggestions. And because we really don't have a high amount of data, we don't really get that much data from this particular one, which is unfortunate. But this is unfortunately a characteristic of not having a large amount of studies exploring different things, saying what microbiome shifts this thing or that thing cause. In this case, we don't even have a prescription antibiotic in the list, which is not totally unexpected. But let's go back to changing microbiome, which is the second way. And what we're going to do is, give me one quick second. And what has happened is that missing percentage means that this is an older sample and it has not been updated with the latest statistics. So I'll click that and it will spin for a few minutes and updates the percentile. And now when I go back into changing microbiome, we now have the full list. So if nothing shows up, that's why. And if we go down here to long COVID, we don't have much of a match. We only have 7 percentile. So most people, example, you can't tell the difference. We have 14 bacteria out of 212 possible bacteria. So we do have some matches. We do a get suggestions. And there we have the suggestions. And actually I want to go back to there because I need to toggle it to everything. So it's the same as the other one, get suggestions. And there we have it. And even in that case, we only have a few probiotics there. And now if we go back to changing microbiome, we have consensus. We have 3. Actually, I was looking for 2. The extra one was without the drugs in it. Now go to redo it. View basket suggested. So what we have here is where we have consensus. Remember, one of them had practically nothing. If I click here, we can see that there are 3 things which every set of suggestions, including that from PubMed and that from our own, ends up agreeing on. One is St. John's wort, another one is kefir kuhn, another one is a high-fat diet. And basically, the high-fat diet is one which I would not do because these numbers, which are relative AI calculation of likely impact, are sufficiently close. It's just not worth doing it. Although everybody says the difference is small. The first one there is good, and then we end up with other things which we have too. And now again with this table we can sort to our heart's content. We have 1,700 items on the list. So we can go and, for example, if you sort by priority there, we see things that the person should avoid, in which case inulin, a whole bunch of things there are all avoid, and in this case there's nothing redeeming about them. So we end up being able to actually construct a very comprehensive list, which probably needs to be hand filtered out there. But we have one more aspect which I want to show you before I leave, which is diet component. What we have is often we have nutrients in here which are in food, but they're given by their chemical name, which doesn't help the common person figure out what it should be. So what we have is we have this button which will take you to a sister site, and what it will do is go and list things out based on the nutrients found in the food. So here we have a variety of things. If we look here and we see this top one, which doesn't give a brand name, whatever, is the best. But since we don't know which brand it is, whatever, we go down to basically lamb bologna, and if we click here, we'll see what is in it, and here's the list of all the things in it. Significant here, the term simply means that the amount of these substances in this thing is higher than typically seen for other foods which has the substance. In other words, these are the ones which are which are richer than average than the foods that report the same substances. So somewhere in that combination are the 8 items which are beneficial to be taking. And we can go down and we see lamb liver again. Lamb comes up again. We have turkey. We have veal. We have beef liver fry. And then we get down to other things. Again, with this list, you can go and do things to exert that. And we can list it by things. So if you want to see, for example, whether salmon is a good thing, is it a take or avoid, it's there. And if you go down to the end, we'll also see other things to be avoided. Like, for example, ocean trout should be avoided. Tuna is a good, but there's a few things which seems to be there. You can simply look at other things. You can look at insect grubs. Termites is a food in parts of the world, rather hard to get a local safe way. And composite foods or eggs and their products, should you be doing eggs? And guess what? Answer is, it looks like eating eggs is a good thing to do based on the fact that it has the nutrients which are contributing. And the nutrients here are significant for treating the condition. So that's basically it. We have, need to say, a pretty comprehensive. We have specific items from specific studies, and we have also a extrapolation on the food for which foods you should be taking. So that's basically my current update on how to deal with long COVID. So if you have any questions or comments, add it to the video or on the blog post. Have a good day.